Welcome to Her Remarkable History. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. The execution of Mabel Brigge and the Black Fast. During the Tudor period, there were many executions that haunted society. High-profile people such as Thomas More, Thomas Cromwell, and even queens were executed in brutal fashion. But one of the strangest executions was that of Mabel Brigge. She was condemned during the reign of Henry VIII and was sentenced to death, having been accused of witchcraft and also treason. She was accused of conducting a black fast, a fast which was very religiously devoted. However, Mabel's fast was intended to bring about the death of Henry VIII and Thomas Howard, the Duke of Norfolk. She wished to please God with the fast in order to bring about the death of the king. This was deemed to have been witchcraft, and England's history is rather littered with the persecution of women linked to witchcraft. So today we look at the execution of Mabel Brigge, and remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. Born roughly around 1506, very little is known about Mabel Brigge's early life and background, but she emerged as a servant from some families in different households. During this time and work, she was known to fast regularly as part of her Catholic faith. However, her working life was debatable, as she was once fired having been accused of theft. She then moved to Yorkshire to work in a household, and she arrived there with 2 children, and it's believed when she found work here she was a widow. In 1537 she arrived to work in the house of the Lockers in Yorkshire, and it was here she was hired and paid to perform a black fast. In August of 1537, Mabel, on a Friday, Saturday and Sunday, would perform the ritual and fast on request of a lady called Isabel Buck. Isabel would usually perform the fast, but she recently lost a child, and the purpose of this initial fast was to wish about the return of some money that Buck had lost. Mabel Brigge was paid for the fast with 2 dry gallons of wheat and half a yard of linen, but she didn't involve herself in this behaviour for money or reward. She could have made much more money making fasts in different households, and these events were performed to bring about a specific outcome, with being completely in tune with your spirituality, hoping that God would bring about a required consequence of action. The fast took 3 days, and no meat or milk was allowed to be consumed. John Locker was the head of the house where Mabel was staying, and at some point yet again she was accused of theft, having allegedly stolen money. It's probable that she was abused and beaten in this household too, as she was then thrown out. There was a great deal of conflict between Mabel Brigge and the Locker family, and it was the Lockers that brought about the allegations that would see Mabel Brigge being sentenced to death. In the January of 1538, Locker, along with his wife Agnes, stated how Brigge was fasting to bring about the death of the reigning monarch Henry VIII and Thomas Howard, the Duke of Norfolk, and coincidentally the uncle of Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard. It's believed that possibly this could have been brought about due to her issues with the religious turbulence that was sweeping England at the time, an allegation which was incredibly serious. To dissent against the monarchy was incredibly dangerous. The black fast that was performed is considered to have possibly been aimed at bringing about the death of Henry, and a chantry priest also had to give his consent, and it was confirmed at Mabel's trial that a priest did allow for the fast to take place. But Mabel was considered to be indulging in acts of witchcraft by trying to bring about the death of the king, and anyone wishing this was obviously guilty of committing treason, as Henry VIII had a great fear of being assassinated by his subjects. Agnes Locker stated that Brigge had previous in the dark arts and had previously performed a black fast that aimed to kill a man who had wronged someone she was friends with. Shortly after this, the man in question then broke his neck during a fall, and she was considered in touch with the dark arts. At her trial, Mabel Brigge also said that John Locker, the head of the household she worked in, allegedly paid her 7 shillings to fast to bring about the death of King Henry. She didn't hold back from the fact she had performed the Black Fast in the past, and labelled it a Centrinian's fast. They had been used previously to refer to when a witch would absorb all of her willpower and concentrate this upon a victim or individual until they died or were taken sick. During the Tudor period, many men and women were sentenced to death for just dissenting against the monarch or failing to support the king. Because of this, Mabel Brigge was treading a very thin line. Elizabeth Barton, for example, was known as the Nun of Kent, and she made predictions and prophecies against the king, even warning Henry about his marriage to Anne Boleyn. She met a rather bloody end, but the reasoning behind Brigge's fasts was most probably caused by her great unhappiness and the king's break from Rome, and his change to the Protestant Reformation which was being brought into the country. At trial on the 11th of March 1538, Henry VIII had already had 3 wives, with Jane Seymour dying, and it's likely that the king's marriages and lack of success caused a huge degree of upset across the country, along with the fact that Catholicism was being phased out in favour of Protestantism. Also, Cromwell's savage dissolution of the monasteries probably caused a significant amount of distress for Catholics, and this anger was rife with the Catholics. It resulted in the Pilgrimage of Grace, where rebels rose up in the north, bringing about a significant amount of noise against the king, and this focused in Yorkshire, the very county where Mabel Brigge was tried. Today, conducting a black fast may be considered incredibly bizarre, strange, and far-fetched. But during the Tudor period, this was incredibly serious. Religion dominated society for centuries, and the king was the most important person in the land. With Henry becoming the supreme head of the Church of England, it's likely that further comments about the king in this fashion, and to wish about his death, were deemed horrifically serious and carried intense consequences. Mabel Brigge was treated very seriously and was sentenced to death for treason. Her friend, Isabel Buck, was also located and found guilty, and Buck's husband was convicted of attempting to pervert the course of justice by bribing the judges. It was said that of Mabel Brigge, although the fasting of a poor and obscure female servant does not now seem to offer much of a real threat to royal power and authority, Mabel Brigge and her fast were taken quite seriously by King Henry's Council of the North. The action against her was swift and decisive. On the 7th of April 1538, Mabel Brigge was to be executed. Henry VIII was personally informed she had been convicted for treason, her black fast to inflict serious intent against the king. The standard sentence for women convicted of treason during the Tudor period was hanging, rather than men who were hanged, drawn and quartered. In the city of York, the same place Robert Aske was hanged in chains months later for his involvement in the Catholic Pilgrimage of Grace, she was taken to the gallows. In the centre of the town, in front of a huge crowd, she was hanged, slowly strangling to death in front of hundreds of people. At the time, it was important for Henry to keep his people in check, and by conducting high-profile executions of those who were quite publicly dissented against him, allowed him to put other people off dissenting against him. This also allowed him to reinforce his religious policies much stronger and with an iron fist. Mabel Brigge's life was incredibly different and bizarre, and although little is known about her early life and her story, it's fair to say that certain parts of her life were very tragic. Being portrayed as a widow, and as a woman who was accused of theft, it's fair to say it was very easy for men, especially those with money, to accuse her of witchcraft and being involved in the dark arts. What is interesting is that at her trial she did not deny being involved in black fasts in the past, but she did deny wishing to bring about the death of the monarchy. It's probably that she was the victim of the Locker family, the family she was meant to serve. However, she ended up like so many, going to her death for her involvement and allegedly doing something against the king, and Henry VIII himself was incredibly famous for his terribly savage rules, which resulted in the executions of so many. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.